Okay, good morning, everybody. Um, Welcome to Open Forum. Glad to have you all here. We're going to get started today I'm going to go over with you, just so you guys know, this is going to be pretty elementary for you guys. Some of you are very experienced, and this is going to be pretty elementary where I'm going to start here, but I'm going to start going over the as is one more time. We seem to have a lot of problems. Even some experienced agents are having a lot of problems with some of the details of this. So I just want to go over this real quickly. Some of it's going to be very elementary, and some of it's going to be some things we might have a little bit of a misunderstanding on, things we've covered before, or we might have misunderstanding on in general. And a lot of other agents have different opinions of, and so I want to get kind of on the same page as far as our brokerage is concerned, maybe save you guys some arguments down the line, and maybe save you guys making some mistakes on behalf of your clients or of yourself. So let me share my screen. Does anybody have anything else before we start? Nothing. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see that okay? Big enough? Okay. So I'm going to cover the as is real quick. John seller, Maria seller, these are the sellers. Please, where do you find the seller information? On the property appraiser site, right? Seller information is there. You don't put of record. Don't do that. It's just that's sloppy and half-hearted, and please don't do that. Don't put could be you. I've seen people turn these in before where it says people put could be you in the thing, and people just copy it. Could be you. I don't know what nationality that name would be, but could be you. John Seller, Maria Seller, Billy Buyer. I don't think I need to tell you guys these are made up names. 123 Oak Street, Clearwater, Florida, Pinellas County. That's a made up number, and that is obviously a made up legal description. Okay. Here's where it gets important. So you guys don't end up buying washers and dryers. Washers and dryers are not listed on this. Guys, please read the contract, know what's on there, what's not. If the washer and dryer were there and it has not been excluded anywhere else, or if you just want to ask for it, just want to make sure it's there. Does it matter what it says in the MLS? Not really, not compared to the contract. Okay, so the washer and dryer, the contract overrides whatever it says in the MLS. If it says real big letters, and you guys on either side of this, and you write in there washer and dryer do not convey, whatever, but then somebody puts it on the contract, guess what? They convey. Or somebody's going to have to buy a washer and dryer because your buyer has the right to them if they're written here. So read the contracts people send you, and if your buyer wants the washer and dryer, even if they didn't specifically say it, but there was one that's showing, put it on here. If it's a nice washer and dryer, even if it's a decent washer and dryer, take a picture of it. I don't think you need to say, I would even say if it's a fancy Samsung washer and dryer, whatever, $1,000 each or whatever they are now, write that down. Okay, model numbers, or washer and dryer that we're seeing it showing. The pictures will be on the MLS. You will have taken pictures of it, hopefully, if they weren't, because we just had last week somebody replaced the washer and dryer with scratch and dent ones that they got from a garage sale, looked like. So just be careful with this. Following items are excluded from the purchase. None. Okay, so put none unless it says, and that's always negotiable. People come back and say, I just want to let you know we're taking the washer and dryer. Oh, okay. That's something you work out in the contract. $400,000 for this fake property. $5,000 down. People ask me all the time, what's a reasonable thing? If somebody puts $1,000 down on $400,000, that's not reasonable escrow, earnest money. But it should be 1% to 2%. Typically, if it's a cash deal, it can be higher. But this one's a finance deal. It can be whatever. You can agree to whatever you want. You can agree to $5 if you want, or nothing if you want. But typically 1% to 2% is reasonable. Check one. Please fill in the blanks as much as you can. It's to be made within 3 days. If neither box is checked, then it's going to be within 3 days. You guys never fill these out, but I wish you would. ABC title. Jose at ABC Title, the phone number. I did not have the creativity to fill out the address, fake address. So 80%, this one is conventional. 80% is a loan amount. So 80% of $400,000 is $320,000, which means they would have 80,000 left to bring. They've already brought 5 for their earnest money, so 75. Is that the exact amount they'll have to bring to closing? Of course not. They're going to have closing costs as well. But that is the part that goes toward the purchase. Obviously, the contract, you'd have no way to know what their exact amount is going to be. Acceptance of offer and counteroffers, effective date. So the effective date, if you look at B, the effective date of this contract shall be a date when the last one buyer or seller has signed or initialed and discovered and delivered this offer or final counteroffer. We do have issues with these. If this date goes by and you guys, let's say they don't sign it till the 28th. I gave these people 3 days to get this done. I gave them till Saturday. That's plenty of time, but typically. But I see people do it for the same day or tomorrow, and the owners live in Australia, and it's already tomorrow. By the time they look at it, they're sleeping. By the time they look at it, it's crazy. So right now in Australia, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, or whatever it is. I think it is 1 o'clock in the morning there. So they're not going to be up, and then they are going to get up, and it's already going to be tomorrow, etc. So just be mindful of where the seller is, or if they have to talk to people, or they've said it's going to be, I've got to talk to my mom and I've got to talk to whoever to get this done. Just be mindful of that. If you go forward and they did not sign, let's say the effective date is not till the 28th for whatever reason, but everybody makes escrow and they do their application to the mortgage company, do we still have a contract? Can you come back later and say, oh, well, I only gave them till the 27th and they signed on the 28th and now I don't like their attitude? No, it doesn't matter. Once you went forward, and that goes with any part of this contract, if someone breaches, but then you go for, and it's not a breach, they just didn't sign it in time so the offer expired. But let's say someone breaches something like the mortgage application date. You can't come back after you've been doing many other things, inspections and appraisals and everything else, and say, we wanted to keep the buyer's deposit because it looks like they didn't apply for their mortgage until day 7. You can't do that. You can do it on day 6 and they didn't apply by day 5. And the lender does have to tell you, I don't have their application filled out yet. I don't have their application completed yet. And it's day 6, then you can get out of the contract because they have breached. But if you have gone on to do other stuff, you can't go back later and say, oh, well, you remember how you're supposed to have that application within 5 days? Well, it's day 26 and you still don't, well, if they still don't, that's one thing. But you didn't get in until day 7 and now we were going to keep your deposit. No, you're not. Because you went forward like there was a contract. As long as you're going forward like there is a contract, then you cannot call someone for a previous breach that has been resolved by then. Okay, and that goes for escrow, goes for everything. They don't get their escrow in until day 4, but you never noticed. You can't come back later and say, "Oh, you guys breached with the escrow. It was a day late." Tough luck. You didn't notice at the time. And most people don't care. Most people don't. Hey, great, day 4. At least we got their earnest money now. Okay. Typically set the closings out. You guys know whatever your lender tells you when you're the buyer's agent. Obviously, that's who'll be writing the offer. I just picked February 29th because how often do you get to pick February 29th? So, but that's also it's 36 days from now, which is a good time. Usually between 30 and 45 days. Obviously, the earlier, the more attractive it is to the seller, but also the less chance that your lender's got everything on time and ready to go. Then you might have to ask for an extension. We're not seeing a whole lot of extensions right now, which is great. Seems like lenders, because they're not super busy. They're getting everything done. Typically, as you guys know, it's underwriters. Underwriters get super busy. This one, I did not check this one on this one, but this is for when you have a tenant somewhere or you're trying to do some kind of post-closing occupancy. But this one I see all the time when you have a tenant that people don't check this box. You need to check this box if you have a tenant, because obviously, and a tenant's going to be carrying on if they're still under lease. Obviously, you're not. It's subject to lease. It is not going to be clear at closing. Vivian, you have a question now?
Yes, Ryan. If a seller wants post-closing occupancy, shouldn't there be a lease as an addendum to the contract?
Okay, so there's a post-closing occupancy addendum. You fill that out. That's all that needs to be with the contract. You don't have to have negotiated the lease already. That gives you time to negotiate the lease. That post-closing occupancy does, and you will check this box, as well as there's a box at the end to check for post-closing occupancy, and there's an addendum to attach. But you definitely check this box too, because it's not going to be broom swept.
What if they don't agree on the terms of the lease?
But that says that if you don't agree on it, then the contract's dead.
Okay.
So it'll be during the inspection period, and you just, okay, didn't work out. But that's a case where the seller has some say about whether or not they get the contract goes forward. Otherwise, the seller doesn't during the inspection period, obviously. Second, buyer's sole discretion, the lease return. Okay, during the inspection period, the buyer can check the lease, obviously, and if it doesn't, it's not acceptable. Obviously, they can terminate the contract. Let's go to assignability. I love the second box here. A lot of you guys love the third box. But if Billy Buyer, sorry, I had to go back up and check his name. If Billy Buyer can't close on this by himself without having his mom co-sign for him, then he's going to need to assign it. If I'm representing Billy Buyer and I'm writing this offer, I am going to, and it's called an offer until it's accepted, then it's a contract. When I'm writing this offer, I am going to put may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. That way I don't have to get the seller's permission every time I want to assign something. Okay. When you have to get someone's permission, you guys are all, so many times we go through deals with other realtors and everybody's buddy and everything's great. And I'll get my client to sign this on. Sometimes you run into people who aren't easy to deal with, who want their blood from a turnip at every turn, right? And so you ask them for something and they're going to want something back. You tell me that Billy needs his mom to sign for him, to sign with him. And I thought we had you'll get sellers like this, and if you haven't, then you will. I thought we had a strong buyer. You told me we had a strong buyer. You told me this, you told me that. Thought we had a strong buyer. Now, no, I don't like this. He needs to put more money down. So if you're representing your client, the best thing you do is put may assign but not be released from liability under this contract. Nobody should have a problem with that. Because if anything, now I'm the seller. If you assign it to somebody else, now I've got more people, because I never released Billy Buyer. Now I've got more people to hold responsible for this contract. Frederick.
Yes. Hi, Ryan. How you doing?
Good.
I'm sorry. Can I back up to number 6? In a situation like example, Baldwin Park, where you'll have a property that has a front and has a guest mother-in-law suite in the back that gets rented often, would you check that letter B there for that situation?
What is going on now?
Like in Baldwin Park,
I'm going to expect that to be vacant.
For example, Baldwin Park, you have a main property and then they'll have a guest apartment above the garage that often is rented. And so if there's someone who's staying there on a lease and who will remain there for a period of time, do you check that box, letter B? Is that for that as well?
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah, if it's got one person there, yes. Okay. Otherwise, I expect a clean and broom swept vacant property.
Okay. And so then you just need an addendum. You don't have to, like you were telling Viviana.
No. You don't need an addendum at all for that, because I just need to see the lease. So I'm buying your house, okay, and you've got you've got someone that you rent the back apartment to for $1,000 a month.
Okay.
I'm taking over. If I buy your house, I'm going to live in your house, and I'm taking over the lease on that. I can take it. The person can't get kicked out. Just to cover this, and we cover this in our investment part. When I buy a property that has a tenant under a lease, I simply take your place on the as landlord.
Okay.
I cannot raise the rent when I move in. I can't do anything until that lease is over.
Right. I thought you said to her she doesn't have to attach the lease, so that's why I was just.
Oh no, because she didn't have a lease. That's for post-closing occupancy. If I want to stay in my house.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So if I buy your house there, Alex, if I buy your house and you say, I've got to stay here 3 more months. We're going to close on February 29th, but I want to stay here until April 3rd or whatever it is, right? Then we're going to have a post-closing occupancy. I'm going to own the house, but I'm going to have a short-term lease with you.
Gotcha.
Okay.
But then it would just be checked with an addendum about that, not.
Yes. Yeah. The addendum simply says that you and I are going to work out within 5 days or whatever we put on there. We're going to work out a lease between an agreement between me and you.
Okay. Thank you.
Closing occupancy or buyer pre-occupancy is terrible idea. Always have a lawyer draw something up. You got to protect your clients. There's a terrible idea for me to buy your house and let you continue to live in it. Because if you fall down and bust your head and die, now I've got liability there. You know, there's different things that could happen in that time period. Or if you decide more commonly, you decide I can't get out. My other house was supposed to close on April 1st. I was going to move on April 3rd. And now I don't have anywhere to go. It fell through. I got to stay here. Now I've got to evict you from the house that I just bought from you. So there's all kinds of things. And you get mad about that and you start tearing stuff up. Now what? Right? So there's all kinds of issues.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So assignability, guys, please do the second one. You can do the third one if you want. You're just creating more stuff down the road, and you'll be calling me about it later and saying, the seller wants this now. And I would say, oh, okay. This is you guys fill these in. Contract contingent upon 30 days after effective date. You can do 20. Yes, you can do 40. You can do whatever number you want, but this is your financing, your loan approval period, not your financial contingency period. Used to be. It's your loan approval period. Buyer obtaining approval of a conventional in this case, because it's 20% down. I know that's conventional. It'll say it on the pre-approval though. Fixed, obviously. I put in 6.25. I told you guys before, this kind of little trick. I like to go low on these. I'd rather just do 6% if I'm protecting my client. But if the pre-approval says a certain percentage, then I'll do that. But if I can get away with something here, like right now, it's just over 6%. I would say 6%. That gives me my client a little more wiggle room when it comes down to the end. Say, oh, they got approved for 6.25. They didn't get approved for 6. That's what we put on there. So just pay attention to that. And if you're on the selling side of the listing side, pay attention to that as well. Give them 5 days. I don't like to leave them blank if I can help it. Just looks more professional filling stuff in, and it's more clear to everybody. It's more clear to the clients. If there's ever a review of the contract for any kind of discrepancy, it's more clear to everyone that you intentionally put numbers in there. That being said, I didn't put one on this one, but 15 days for that. You see people all the time, guys, check this. I can't believe I went over this. Check this. Don't do, write it here if you want 3% credit toward closing costs. If you want something like that, write it here, but also write it in the additional terms. This is dirty just to write it here and leave it. And because this is where people will write buyer will be credited 3% toward their closing costs and prepaids. See how that can be? I mean, I didn't even get it all in there, but you see how tiny it gets and how it's just put 3% toward closing costs, or put, that's what I like to do, see additional terms. Okay, that's what I'd rather see there. It's just dirty to put stuff like that in there. And yes, you guys have been the victim of that. And yes, you guys have done that to other people that have not noticed the 3%, or it's usually a smaller number. $3,000 toward closing costs, something like that people don't really notice. Like, oh, we got a full price offer, yay! They don't see that. Oh, I've got to give $15,000 to the buyer. It's just kind of dirty. Seller shall designate closing agent in this part of the state that I'm in. You guys know this. The seller typically pays for buyers, or pays for the title policy. Other parts, the buyer does it. Sometimes you guys will get these where the buyer wants to designate the closing agent. It should raise a small red flag for you, just kind of catch your attention. Why are they doing this? Sometimes it's an attorney who does their own closings. Sometimes it's an attorney's brother or sister or somebody who wants to give them the closing. Maybe they're going to credit them for it or whatever, or they just, their brother's an attorney and he wants to look it over, or their aunt's a title agency and she wants, or title agent or an attorney, and she wants to look it over and make sure nobody is taking advantage of them or whatever it is, some silly reason, but they want to do it perfectly fine if they do. Guys, they all have, you don't need to be worried about it. They all have the same legal responsibilities. You know, I'd like to see it be a reputable company. Somebody you've heard of would be great, but they all have to abide by the same things. Make sure they do the lowest promulgated rate. If you're paying for it, if your client's paying for it, all the ones that we deal with, the ones who are coming in here and talking to you and stuff like that, they all do the lowest promulgated rate, which is title is one of the few things that the state regulates the lowest someone could charge, because they don't want Mike opening up a title company and undercutting everybody and doing, you know, substandard work. Just, hey, I'm the cheapest title in town. That's why you don't hear him say that. You never hear him say, we're the cheapest title insurance in town. That's something you'll never hear, because it's the lowest promulgated rate that the state allows. And most of them do that. Not all of them do that, but and title insurance should be around, I haven't checked it lately, but around $600 per $100,000. So a $500,000 house should be about $3,000 in title insurance, maybe a little bit more. Then you've got all the other costs and stuff. Home warranty. Buyer,
Ryan,
seller, yes,
is that the same for commercial?
it's typically it's the same.
Okay, thank you.
Special assessments, seller shall pay. These are okay, guys. These are not does not include condominium homeowner association. This is not where you fight over special assessments. Okay. This is public special assessments. We talked about this before. Once in a while, there will be you guys had examples of it when we talked about it before. There'll be a street where the actual residents are responsible for it. Not in an HOA, a gated community. That's all the time, but just like a public road that for some reason they all went in together and promised the city that if they paved their road, they would pay for it. They would take care of it. And so there can be a special assessment like that. Very, very rare. So this is assumed to be done. Disclosures. This is the rest of it. Inspection. Let's get to inspection. You guys need to go through this boilerplate stuff just so you understand it. I would recommend reading it. But inspection and right to cancel with an as is. You have 7 days, you have 15 days, you have whatever it is you negotiate here. All these terms are negotiable. After the effective date within which to have such inspections at your sole discretion. You guys know this. We've been over this a million times. The buyer can back out for any reason. They have a personal situation come up. They get a bad feeling. They had a bad dream. They went to church and the preacher told them, you know, whatever, something occurred to them and they decided not to buy it. Then they absolutely do not have to. But during that inspection period, they could drop out for any reason. They do not have to get an inspection. I know it's called an inspection period. They do not have to get an inspection. Let me ask you this. If they back out before the 3rd business day, by the way, inspections are calendar days. Earnest money deposits are business days. So if we sign a contract today, tomorrow will be day 1. Let's say they have 3 days. Tomorrow will be Thursday, will be day 1. Friday will be day 2. Saturday, Sunday do not count. Monday will be day 3. If Monday's a holiday, then Tuesday will be day 3. Okay, for its business days, days the bank's open is what escrow is, or the earnest money deposit is. For inspection, it is calendar days. If it ends on a weekend, it goes to Monday. So if I have 10 days from today might be a Sunday, I think. I don't know. But if it is a Sunday, then it rolls over to Monday. They can get out before. So let's say I signed this contract today. Tomorrow's day 1. I've got 7 days. Tomorrow, everybody signs the contract today. Tomorrow is day 1. Friday is day 2. Monday is going to be day 3 for the earnest money, but Saturday is day 3 for the inspection. Let's say on Saturday I get it inspected and I don't like it. I never made escrow. Or even if I don't get it inspected, I decide not to buy it. Never made escrow. Do I have to make escrow? No, I do not. Not if I back out before escrow was due. If I wait until day 6 and I wait until Tuesday and my escrow was due on Monday, I did not make escrow and I cancel on Tuesday, what happens then? I was already in breach of contract. They can come after me for the escrow that I never made because I was already in breach of contract. Okay. Everything on this contract is serious. Everything on this offer, once it becomes a contract, is dead serious. If you breach something as a buyer or seller, you are legally responsible. This is a legal document. You're legally responsible for it. Now, are they going to chase me for $4,000 or $5,000? I don't know. They can or they cannot. Most likely, if I can't, they're just going to be get out of here. But they might chase me for it. They have a legal grounds to chase me for it. And of course, talk to an attorney before you go shooting your mouth off about that. But they do have legal grounds for that because I was in breach of contract and I do owe that money. Yes, Christina.
Hey, so a couple questions, and you can tell me if you want me to just save them to the end. So I wanted a little clarity on that scenario that you were describing just now. My other question is, in terms of the FAR as is versus the other FAR contract that we have, what are your thoughts on advantages of using that one versus using the as is? And then I call, I was just asking about that EMD thing. I feel like I always get mixed up about that. I called legal and they were like, well, weekend days count, but if the last day falls on a weekend or on a holiday, then it goes to the next day. So
That's
I
an
don't know.
inspection period. The EMD only counts business days.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was asking him about EMD, but yeah. Okay. Okay.
But yes, that's true. Only weekdays count unless it falls on a weekend. It goes to, yeah, of course. Yeah. That's business day. That's a definition of business day. But if I have a 15-day inspection, my first weekend all counts. All that counts. That's a difference. If I go, let's say we go more than 7 days. So if I have a 15-day inspection from today, my first weekend's going to count. My second weekend's going to count. It's going to expire obviously on a Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, my
so
question was EMD. My question was specifically, if
they're right. So yeah, weekdays count. Weekdays only count. in that.
okay. Well, they were saying that the weekends did count, but
Absolutely
that
not. If your
okay.
first day is Friday, let's
Mhm.
say we signed a contract on Friday and you've got 3 days, Saturday and Sunday do not count for that.
Okay.
For that.
Okay.
You
Okay.
have 3 business days.
So what are your thoughts on, because obviously, after the Great Recession, the as is kind of became the primary thing that mostly everybody is using. But I mean, what are your thoughts on the other contract? And do you feel like it's more advantageous to sellers or not? Because I've kind of heard some thoughts on that.
Yeah, everybody has their own thoughts on it. I cannot stand that contract. So I'm biased because I like things to be cut and dry and upfront. I think that contract is for both parties. So I've done a whole class on this before a couple years ago. So that here's what happens with that contract. Your inspection period in that contract, you've seen those of you who haven't seen it, I'd like to be able to show it to you, but it says in there in the middle of this contract, it's very similar to this one, but it points out in there that you have 1.5% toward wood destroying organisms, 1.5% toward general repairs, not to be confused with cosmetic repairs. You have 1.5% toward WDO, the water damage. So all of these things can add up on this, and the seller could have to come out of pocket up to 4.5% without ever negotiating anything, just based on the buyer's inspection. So what happens is the buyer gets inspected. The seller, if they don't cross through those or put zeros there, which is what I would always have the seller do.
Right.
If they don't do that, so the seller has to do up to 1.5%. So on this house, it would be $6,000 on a $400,000 house, $6,000 in general repairs that they have to do. Now, what does that mean? If the AC has mold in the coils and there's typical stuff, then the seller is responsible for those. If the seller doesn't agree, or they have moisture in the garage, that side door of the garage, which everybody does, then they have to repair those things, right?
Right.
If the seller doesn't agree with the buyer's inspection, the seller has to get their own inspector. They can't just say, no, I don't agree. They have to get their own inspector and pay them to come out and do it. And if the buyer doesn't like the seller's inspection, they have to legally combine and split the cost of a third-party inspector.
Okay.
So that's a lot of arguing goes on with all that stuff. The buyer cannot back out. Your buyer cannot back out for any reason. So if they sign this contract today and then someone passes away, one of the parties passes away tomorrow, the other party's still in it, still their inspection, their EMD is still up for grabs.
Mhm.
They're going to lose their EMD. It's not as protective for the buyer. It's not as protective for the seller. I don't see the point in making things more challenging.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think you get happier clients at the
Mhm.
end of the day with this contract.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This listing agent had requested the other type because of that, and his explanation to me was like, oh, it's a little bit more locked in for the buyer, and that's why we took your contract over others. But yeah, I agree. I tend to prefer this one.
That's a great thing. And so what I tell you guys to do, like any good salesperson would do, is find out what somebody's hot button is. Ask them, is there anything in particular that the seller is looking for? And in this case, the guys might say, yeah, we've had 2 buyers back out in the first 4 days without even getting an inspection, because we've all seen this happen before. Because of buyer's remorse, or because, one of them, their mother passed away in New York and they had to go out of town for 3 weeks and it just wasn't a good time for them. They couldn't do it. They really wanted the house, but they couldn't do it, or whatever it was, right? And so their seller said, you know what, no more of this. Is there any way we can make these people, not back out for no reason? And their agent told them, which they should. Yeah, well, if we use the standard contract, then they can't just back out for no reason. They have to have a good reason. They have to get an inspection and have a good reason for backing out. And that reason for backing out has to be the repairs were more than 1.5%, unless someone zeroed it out. The repairs are more than 1.5%. Now, if you zero it out and they get an inspection that says that, they can just say, you know what, we don't like it. We don't want to make these repairs.
Okay.
And the seller can
Okay.
say, well, you didn't ask me to make those repairs. And they could say, well, you know what, that's fine. We didn't want it anyway. I don't want you to make those repairs. Now I feel like it's a damaged house or whatever, right?
So they have to, like, basically, if they've got the 1.5% and they just change their mind, they're locked in if the seller is willing to do that 1.5%.
Unless the repairs are over 1.5%. Well, it doesn't matter if the seller, well, let's go back. It doesn't matter if the seller is willing to do it or not. They're contractually obligated to do it.
Right.
If the repairs, if that's $400,000 house, that it only needs $5,000 worth of repairs, the buyer cannot back out. The seller just makes the seller doesn't have a choice. They're going to make the $5,000 repairs. They're contractually bound to, and that's it. Deal goes forward.
Yeah, I'm just right. So from a buyer's perspective, if somebody's requesting that, or if I'm using that from a buyer's perspective, basically, if the seller is willing to do whatever we've agreed to in that section for repairs, they can't just be like, well, you know what?
Correct.
Mercury's in retrograde. I'm going to cancel.
Correct.
Okay.
So if
Yeah,
they
so
repair
I agree with
those
what you're
blood
saying.
stains from the murder on the floor, they repair the flooring there, I still have to buy that house.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's really, I mean, I don't know what the advantage, because I've just heard a lot of talk about, oh, this is great for sellers because the buyers are more locked in, but it sounds like it's more risk involved for both parties. I kind of agree with what you're saying.
It is. And yeah, well, what sounds better to a seller than as is? How many sellers have you ever talked to say, you know what, Christina, I'm so tired of this. I just want to sell it as is. They don't realize what it actually means, but they love an as is contract, right? They love hearing that. Buyers are usually more concerned about what does as is mean. You say, no. You get an inspection, you can get stuff, or you can walk. What more do you want than that, right?
Yeah.
So it's great. Now let's go back to that scenario. So of the $5,000 repairs that it needed, and they've signed on for 6, right? Because it's a $400,000 house. 1.5% is $6,000. So they've signed on for 6. Now let's say it's 7. Buyer can just walk. So seller's not really that locked in. If they've agreed to 1.5. Now, if I'm a seller and I zero that out, buyer can walk anyway. Buyer can say, you've offered me 0 by contract. I don't have to renegotiate. I can just walk.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I've zeroed it out, which is going to happen if it's my listing and somebody sends me one of those, I'm going to say, can you send that on an as is? And they're like, no, my buyer really wants to use this contract. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to zero that out, because I'm not obligating my seller for $6,000 of repairs on this house that we don't think it needs that. Plus, it's $7,000, they can get out anyway.
But then, so let's say you zero it out, and then I have the buyer, and then whatever it is, they decide, oh, okay, they can still come to terms and say, hey, XYZ was in the report. Would you do it?
Yeah, you can always renegotiate. You can renegotiate right up to the closing table, right?
Yeah.
So you can always renegotiate as long as both parties are willing to do it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Random, but I have an agent that's quite upset with me because he submitted an offer on my listing and my seller countered, and it's just in the offer stage. And so I redrew the contract in order to keep a clean, cross out free contract. And he's advised me that is a violation. and it always has to be on the same agreement. Like, that I wasn't supposed to redraw a clean contract in the offer stage.
Well, he doesn't have to do anything with it. I mean, you told him what you wanted. You told him what your seller would agree to.
We
he can use
ratified
he
it.
can
Yeah,
use it
he
as a
just got
template.
mad. He just got mad and said, you're not supposed to do that. Like, you're not ever supposed to redraw the contract and have a clean contract in the offer stage. And I'm like, I'm not aware of any violations there.
No, I'm not aware of any violations either. Sounds like you gave him a perfect template of what your seller wanted, so he did his work for him.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Sounds
you.
good. I wouldn't do that though in the future. Just have him redraw it clean. Tell him your seller wants to see a clean one. It's, oh, it's fine. We'll just cross through, but you think it's too much. I feel better. My seller prefers a clean contract.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Because some people are too lazy to rewrite it and have their, or sometimes it's difficult to have your buyer re-sign it and stuff. Yes, Vivian.
So when you're writing a VA loan backed offer, I don't know that they allow you to use as is. Is that correct?
The VA has its own things that they're going to fix and stuff. So VA is going to require all those general repairs to be done anyway.
Right.
So VA and FHA, the government does not want people moving into a house that is not completely repaired and livable.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal, but it needs to be completely repaired and livable. You cannot delay repair. This is what people ask me: should I take this VA offer, or this conventional offer, or this FHA offer? They have different things with their appraisals. Appraisals stick to certain offers, to government. Any government-backed loan appraisal stick for 6 months. Also, any government-backed loans are going to want the property to be fully repaired. You can't delay repairs. So I can't give you money because the front door, the deadbolt doesn't work. I've got to fix the deadbolt before you move in.
No, what I was asking is, do they allow you to submit an as-is contract, or does it have to be a standard FAR?
What? Oh yeah, as is VA all the time.
Okay.
It just has a VA writer. The FHA VA writer comes with it. I mean, it doesn't come with it. You've got to put it on there. Any other questions on that before we go forward? Okay. Walkthrough, reinspection. You guys need to, on the day prior to closing date or on closing date prior to time of closing, as specified by buyer. Guys, pay attention to this stuff. Buyer or buyer's representative may perform a walkthrough. They don't have to, and follow-up walkthrough if necessary. Inspection of the property solely to confirm that all items of personal property are on the property, to verify the seller has maintained the property as required by the as-is maintenance requirement and has met all other contractual obligations. As a listing agent, do I have to give them access?
Yes.
Great answer. Says it right here. Yes, absolutely I do. What if I don't?
You're in violation of the contract.
Yes, my seller is in violation. I mean, assume it wouldn't be me. It would be the seller who didn't want them on there. But yes, absolutely. The seller is in violation. And what can happen? If closing can be delayed, pretty much the ball is in our court at that point. The closing can be delayed. The seller or the buyer can sue for specific performance, on and on and on and on. Just make sure that you do this. I don't know why. And if you're on the buying side, make sure you do your walkthrough. You do it for them if they don't want to. Quit being lazy. Do your walkthrough. Go to closing. If they're going in to sign, go to closing. Do a good job. Yes, Christina, your hand's up.
So I have a scenario where my buyer is purchasing a home furnished. It's currently being used as an Airbnb. And so the seller picked a closing date a little bit, out further than what they wanted. We agreed to it because she didn't want to cancel her bookings and mess up her superhost status. Okay, cool. So they have a booking that's checking out the day of the closing. And it kind of just begs the question for me. I don't really know. Like, isn't it supposed to be that they should have access at any point? Like, because now I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, well, when exactly are they going to be out of the property? Like, how does that work in terms of if you have a closing date of, January 30th, and a situation like this where the booking is checking out on the 30th. I mean, if they're checking out at like 2:00, isn't that how does that work in terms of the seller's obligations for the contract?
You do not have unfettered access to the property on any date you want. You get one on the day prior to closing date or on closing date. Up to time of closing as specified by buyer, meaning if they want it and the time, as long as it's available, to perform a walkthrough. So
Yeah, I understand the walkthrough part, but in terms of like the closing date, like it's going to be occupied for at least some of the closing date. Is that
you gotta
proper, or
go
isn't it?
after they're supposed to be out.
They're supposed to be able to close and have access to the property at any point during the closing date, right?
No,
No.
not necessarily. No, if I don't have my stuff out, if our closing's at 3 p.m. and I get my stuff out by 10 a.m. or something, that's fine.
Mhm.
You got it's a
Okay.
reasonable amount of time. I mean, what are
Okay.
we arguing over? Do you want to buy it and close or not? Or if not, we can put it off to the
Right.
next day. If the seller can't give you unfettered access to it during this day or during this
Yeah.
time that you've agreed upon, they'll
Mhm.
you have to agree upon a time. So at 1 o'clock, you're going to go by there and we're going to go straight
Right.
to closing after that, assuming all goes well. If all
Yeah.
doesn't go well, then we're not going to close that day. And
Gotcha.
am I going to say, as a seller, can I say, you come to me and say there were supposed to be sofas here according to our agreement, and
Yeah.
the sofas are gone, or the refrigerator's gone,
Mhm.
and I say, well, tough break. Well, guess what? You don't have to close that day. I can't say, well, your day runs out today, and that's tough break. No, you're going to be covered on that. So, yeah, they have to let you in, but they have to give you a time that you can go in at a reasonable time. If we're closing at 1 o'clock and downtown, and this place is in, by Disney, and or closing at 3 o'clock downtown, and this place is by Disney, then you're fine.
Mhm. I have a question too. It's like, and I don't know if this is more a question that they should pose to an attorney, but we've had some shenanigans. This is the one where they put photos in the MLS of appliances that were never actually in the listing when it was listed. And so they're a little concerned about stuff being removed. So let's say we show up and the couches are gone. Like, do they just hold off on the closing? And I
Yeah.
mean, they should really just hold off and
Yeah.
work that out.
Unless they can make it up to me somehow, unless they want
Right.
to say, oh, you
Right.
know what, let me give you $2,000 for those couches, or $4,000, or whatever they were worth.
Right.
Or whatever you agree on. It doesn't matter what they're worth, whatever we agree on. Yeah, unless they work that out right then the closing can be delayed until it's made right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
They can't cancel you and sell it to somebody else. They can't say your contract expired. Sorry. No, you changed the deal. You're in breach.
Right.
Every bit of this contract is a breach, or it's
Mhm.
breachable. Everything is a term. It's all breachable. Tammy.
Hey, I just want to tell a story. One of my friends had a listing, and the buyer chose to not do a walkthrough, so they closed. When they went in the house, there was like a major roof leak, so they were kind of stuck with this roof leak because they didn't do a walkthrough before they closed. Just a little warning to everybody to do a walkthrough.
Yeah.
Especially now, we can actually, if we have an out of area buyer, we can take our phones and video for them in real time, and that's like a timestamp of the condition.
Now, let me ask you something, Tammy. If the seller had said, if the buyer had asked for a walkthrough, and we're closing at 10 in the morning, we got to do a walkthrough at 9, and the seller said, you can't do 9 o'clock. Is there any other, can you do it the day before? Is there any, no, we can't. We got to do it at 9 o'clock. Okay, well, we can't do it at 9 o'clock. So, all right, well, we'll just go to closing. And the seller had denied them access somehow, or just made it inconvenient for them. What do you think the ramifications of that would be?
That they never, hang on, I'm in my car. That they never got a walkthrough then?
But
Or
the buyer
they got a
wanted,
walkthrough at least
to,
after
but
their walkthrough.
the
Yeah.
buyer wanted to, but the first couple times they gave weren't okay for the seller.
Yeah, I guess.
The seller
I
would
don't
have some
know.
liability there, most likely, right?
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely looked bad. Even if the seller didn't
Right.
know about it, it would definitely look bad.
Right. Yeah. It would look like they knew and they didn't want them to notice or something.
No, I was selling my father-in-law's house years ago, while I was here. I mean, it was 5 years ago or something. And I might have told you guys about this, and it was under contract. It was a nice $700,000 house, or something, decent house. And he was sitting in his living room, and the AC had been backed up, so it was leaking on the second floor. Right over between his living room and his kitchen, the floor just collapsed. The ceiling collapsed because of the water damage that from the condensation from the AC. The drain line was plugged, and the whole thing fell through right before closing, a couple of weeks before closing. So they had to put off closing. He had to fix it. I mean, he was there when it happened. He had to fix it all before they could sell it, and delayed the closing by a couple of weeks. But that's life. It happens a lot. It's not the first time. It happens a lot, especially once the seller moves out and stuff like the drain line. You know, they have to leave the AC on something, especially here in the summer. You don't want it getting over 83 degrees in there. So typically you leave the AC on 82 or 83. And a lot of times that happens. Drain lines back up, especially when they put the HVAC on the second floor, or the handler on the second floor. So just be wary of those things. Lots of things can happen between contract and close. Any other questions as we go on? Boilerplate stuff, please read through this, force de jour and all this, title examination, surveys. We had a lot of stuff about surveys. Read through that stuff. Liens, force majeure, closing documents, escrow procedure. Read through all, guys. This is your job to know all this stuff. Access to property, conduct appraisals, inspections, and walkthrough. Seller shall, upon reasonable notice, provide utility service and access to property for appraisals and inspections, including a walkthrough or follow-up walkthrough if necessary prior to closing. Follow-up walkthrough if necessary if something was wrong in the walkthrough. If the couches were gone and you did the walkthrough the day before, and I say, oops, oh my gosh, I told my moving guys to leave those couches. I'll have them back there, by first thing in the morning, or by closing, I'll have them back there. Well, we like to walk through there and see them before we close. Okay. Well, you guys go by there at 11 a.m. I'll make sure the guy drops them off by 9 a.m. or something like that. That's completely fine. Okay. And I have to let you go look at them and make sure they're back there. Because like you said, if you close without them, good luck chasing me down for two used couches. We went over the 1031 exchange waiver last week. FERPTA. Guys, if you're representing a buyer, it's very clear that the buyer could be responsible for this, right? Make sure the title company is withholding the 15%. You don't have to do anything. Just make sure it shows on the Alta that the 15% is being withheld by the title company. That's all you need to do. Make sure that it's being withheld by the title company. Yes, Christina.
So I was just curious in terms of, I have a buyer that wants to buy and build, like buy a lot and do like construction perm or something like that. In terms of the survey, so what do I need to order? I'm just like not 100% sure on that. I mean, I'll figure it out, but I figured I have you here, so why not ask in terms of like determining like what's buildable and things like that. Is it like an environmental study, or what's the best thing to do?
Yeah, typically soil borings and stuff, but an environmental surveyor environmental company will be able to tell you what you need on that specific piece to see. But sometimes it's a soil study. Sometimes it's just soil borings to see, how dense the ground is. Can we build on that, et cetera. And so it depends on what it is. You worry about being wet?
Oh, I just want to make sure, like I know they have to go out there and determine, you may not be able to tell without a study, like what is considered a wetland or not. Like you said, is what's part of the lot is suitable for building and can be built upon. And so I just want to make sure I'm, giving them the right advice on who to hire to those things.
Environmental, I can give you a recommendation. I think we might have them in the, no, I don't think they're on there in the vendor list, but I can give you a recommendation on that. They can just contact these people. They'll mark, they'll do a wetlands demarcation where they mark the wetlands with flags and stuff, just so you can see where they typically determine that by, there's certain vegetation that grows where it gets wet once in a while. It doesn't do that by that, but that's just a guy who goes out there on the ATV can do that. Yeah, they want to make sure you're not building on muck, make sure all that stuff. They'll do a soil study at some point too. Make sure it hasn't been, backfilled or something like that with muck. So you won't have that kind of settling because the ground's wet. You'll always have settling in Florida because they're going to build it up too. But you'll always have settling, but they will make sure the ground's not wet.
Ideal timeline to allow for that type of a survey?
I mean, you need 30 days at least. I would always get 30 days for if you're going to be building something. Always get 30 days. It may be more. They need to get a builder. They need to choose plans and a builder and all that kind of stuff. I I'd like to have the builder do that kind of stuff to determine, make sure they can do it, because they know what they're doing. Make sure they do it. You guys are realtors. And these people who are doing these are doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, whatever they are. They're not environmental surveyors typically that are buying. On. So it's not their level of expertise. It's not their area of expertise. It's not your area of expertise. Builders have to deal with this stuff all the time. I'd like to have a builder on board before I do that.
Yeah, I'd love your contact for the environmental survey. And then if you or anybody else has like a good small builder that will build to, on someone's lot, I'd love, drop it in the chat, please. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's continue to go. Here we go down. I've just done an HOA here. I'm just assuming it's a HOA. Appraisal contingency. I want to talk to you guys about this. After 30 days, the appraisal contingency in this contract is not valid anymore. You cannot come back after 30 days and get your appraisal and say, we're getting out for this. I did not go into loan approval, but I've done that a million times with you guys. There are no more, but we have had questions recently. There are no more denial letters that are necessary. You either have loan approval or you don't. You need your lender to, you don't need to show anything. So there are three options when you go through this. I'm going to cover them again. I cover this all the time, but I want to cover them again. There are three options within that 30 days. Give yourself notes, guys. When you make these, make yourself a calendar of each deal you have of 5 days. Their application needs to be into the mortgage company. They need to be, going back and forth with them all the time. Obviously the inspection period, when that expires, when the EMD is due, but this is important as well. I would make it for like day 25, loan approval. Make sure we have it. If not, we're communicating either way. We're communicating with the listing agent. Okay. And if you're the listing agent, you need to do the same thing. Make sure you're communicating with the buyer's agent, because you don't want to be asleep at the wheel either. But a buyer's agent definitely don't want to be asleep at the wheel, because here's what you have. You either have loan approval. They've already got the appraisal. They've got loan approval. They just maybe have to go, finish underwriting or whatever to get clear to close, but you got loan approval. In which case, obviously you say, we've got loan approval, we're going forward. The second thing, you don't have loan approval, but you still want to go forward. That means you have a conversation with your buyer in writing where they say, you tell, hey, look, the lender's doing the best they can. We've all been talking to the lender. We all agree the lender's doing the best they can. They don't quite have loan approval yet until you get them, your proof of 2 years of tax returns or whatever it was that they didn't think they needed before, but underwriting told them they needed, and blah, 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 right? Something always happens with that. So we're at day 28 and we don't have loan approval yet. Do you guys still want to go forward? We are putting at risk your earnest money deposit. You understand that? Yes, your $5,000 in this case is at risk, but the lender says he's absolutely going to get it done. She's absolutely got it in the bag. It just needs, a couple more days. Do you guys want to go forward or not? You can still go forward even though you don't have loan approval. You just have to let the listing agent know we do not have loan approval, but we're still going forward. Listing agent's going to say, okay, nothing the listing agent can do about it. All right. They're going to say, okay, hope you guys can close. If not, the $5,000 at risk. Oh yeah, we know. I talked to the buyer. They understand. Okay, fine. So that's option 2. And that deal goes forward to closing or not to closing. And the buyer will not get the $5,000 back, typically. Unless somehow the seller can't perform at closing, there's a title problem or there's something. And so you'll see people try that as well. The third option is we don't have loan approval and we want to cancel. Okay, you got to cancel by the 30th day, obviously, in writing, send the release and cancellation. Nobody's going to have a hard time with that because the buyer couldn't close. They don't want to close because they're done. And seller doesn't want someone who can't close. So that's done. You have that right within 30 days if you do not have loan approval to get out of the deal that way. Now, seller's action, the listing agent, well, you need to be paying attention. If you have not heard anything by day 30 because the buyer's agent's asleep at the wheel, you haven't heard anything by day 30, on day 31, 32, and 33, you can cancel the contract. The buyer does get their deposit back, but you can cancel the contract. So if you have a better offer, you don't trust this buyer, you don't think they're going to get approved, whatever it is, you can cancel the contract. Those are your 3 options. Okay. After day 34, after day 33, nobody on day 34 and forward, nobody's ever said anything, which is what happens, I think, with a lot of you guys a lot of the time. The contract just keeps going on and they either close or they don't. But I've seen you guys have perfectly qualified buyers and not let anybody know that they can go forward. So pay attention to that. Not as much right now in this market. There aren't as many sellers, listing agents who will drop you. But a couple of years ago, listing agents would drop you if you didn't let them know, even if you were perfectly qualified. And they could do that. All right, Levette. You're on.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can now. Yes.
Yeah, I thought I raised my hand, but I actually gave you the thumbs up. Okay, so I wanted to speak about the utilities earlier. So when is the sellers obligated to keep the utilities on? Because I had a closing on the seller. He turned the electricity off before closing. We were closing the afternoon. It was off the morning, and of course the tenant was very upset, and so he had to put it on another 24 hours. So what's the right on that one?
After closing, I mean, the right thing to do, or after the walkthrough at least. I mean, I would leave it on. I mean, I don't know why you want to close it, want to do it before closing. I'd wait till it closes.
Well, he didn't expect them to turn it off so soon, so it was kind of like the utility company did it a little bit.
Okay, well, he jumped the gun. So the correct thing to do is to call after the closing.
Okay.
All right. That's the correct thing to do, because you do have to leave it on for the walkthrough, and they can do their walkthrough anytime. I mean, you have to agree on it. You know, theoretically, if they do their walkthrough at 10 o'clock and the closings, and they're out of there by 10:30 and the closings at 12, you could call them at 11 and have them turn it off. Yes. But I mean, I don't know how much money you save by doing that, as opposed to, you know, let the buyers know, hey, thanks for signing all your documents. We're going to turn the power off at 4 o'clock this afternoon, you know, whatever. So they have time to get it on in their name. That's just kind of the nice thing to do. Any other questions on this?
Yeah, I do, Ryan.
Yes.
I had a buyer's agent that sent me over a document for a request for repairs, which I've seen a few times lately. Have you seen using those, or have you started using those?
No, I've seen them used, but no.
So it clearly says at the top of the document that it's not an addendum to the contract. It's just a request. But this agent wanted to use it as the same manner as an addendum and added a signature line for the seller. But besides that, when you're during an inspection period and someone sends you the repair request, if they don't send anything else, if they don't send an addendum, if they don't send a cancellation, what's the requirements for the seller to respond to that? And if they don't respond to it or come to an agreement, what can happen after that?
You're never going to get their deposit. They're going to get their deposit back if they ask for repairs and nobody responded to them.
Okay.
It's renegotiating, is what you're trying to renegotiate, and that puts everything back on the table. I mean, it's not the right thing to do, but you can't ignore it and say, oh, well, and so, well, you should have said a cancellation with it, you know?
Okay. So that document there is an official request.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen these before.
And see, it only is signed by the buyers.
It means nothing. So if I sign this as a seller, all this thing says is I'm asking that you're asking for that. Yeah, I agree you're asking for it.
Yeah, you did.
It does not amend or term any condition of the contract. Yeah, I'll sign it as a seller. I agree that you are asking for those things.
Yeah. So I did it. I'm on the
read it.
seller side. So I had my seller sign it. I'm like, fine, yeah, sign this. But
Well,
hopefully
I mean, you're not going to get anywhere.
she's going to do it. Yeah, no, she's going to do it.
If she's
But
gonna make repairs, that's
I'm
fine.
thinking the title and the lender's not going to accept it, but he says he's used it before. So I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. We'll see if you want to kind of shortcut. So that if that gets presented to you during the inspection period, you have to respond to it. That's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. You can't ignore something like that. They're trying to negotiate. They're saying we want this. Is that good? Is that good realtor behavior? No. I mean, this is not thorough at all. This doesn't mean anything. Write it down on an addendum and send it to me.
Yeah,
Otherwise, and with a note that says, "Hey, my buyer can't go forward. My buyer will not go forward unless we get these things done," or whatever. Buyer requests these repairs. Buyer doesn't want to cancel right now unless we can't get some of these repairs made. Something like that. then you're sending the language that says this, that our place in this contract is contingent on something being done here. You know, you want to send that note with it. But this is silly. I don't know why this is a thing. It is not bind. It says it right here. Those notice did not. They couldn't make it any more clear. It's in bold. Does not amend any term or condition of the contract. That's why there's not a place for the seller to sign on here. Guys, all these forms were done by the Florida Association of Realtors and the Florida Bar. If there's not a place for the seller to sign, it obviously doesn't bind anybody to anything. So all addenda are before. That's why we don't negotiate your commission between buyer and seller. They can't. That's why it's not done with an addendum. You guys who try to change your commission or try to give money back to somebody, it's not an addendum. The other party doesn't need to see that. Doesn't need to agree to that. That is between you and your client. Okay. Even if it's the other agent from you're working with an agent from Keller Williams and they're going to give $2,000 toward your client. That's an agreement between Keller Williams and your client. It's not an agreement for the seller or the buyer or whomever, right? For the other party. So just so you know, that is some things are, just remember all the addenda are between buyer and seller. If it does not pertain to them, it does not pertain to them. This doesn't even pertain to the seller. Really, you're notifying the seller that seller, if they did sign it, they're just acknowledging they saw it. Yes, Christina.
Okay, backing it up real quick on the with the financing. And so basically, if they're approved or not, we need, even if they're approved, we need to reach out and let them know on whatever day it is on the agreement.
Oh, yeah, I'd let them know whenever.
Yeah, I mean, we're always sending like the loan approval. So that's sufficient. We're sending the loan approval, you know, that's all we need to do there, correct?
You don't even have to send that. You just let them know because
Yeah.
you cannot have it and still go forward. You can just let them know, look, Tammy, we're going forward. We have loan
Sure.
approval. We're going forward. That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
It can even be a text. I'd rather see an email, but it can even be a text. Tammy, we have approval. We're going forward. Or Tammy, we don't have approval, but we're going forward. We're feeling really good about it.
Yeah.
We're gonna roll the dice. Don't say
Right.
roll the dice, but that's what you're doing.
And then, but so if they're not, like, let's say, obviously if they're not approved, we're going to let them know during that period anyway. And so it's just, you just need to be like doing the standard community, you know, let them know, yes, no.
Yes, no, and we're going forward or we're not.
Yeah.
One thing you can't do is say, yeah, we're perfectly approved, but we're not going forward. That's the only thing you can't say. But if you're not approved, you can tell them either one.
Okay. Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay, cool.
Just make sure if you tell them we don't have approval, but the buyer still wants to go forward, that you have the buyer in writing telling you that.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
Right.
I did have one time. Yes, the buyer told me, Ryan, the buyer told me that we want to go forward. I don't know if it was a language barrier or what. And they let the listing agent know that they were going forward, even though they didn't have approval. And then the buyer said, I didn't tell you that. I didn't understand. Buyer didn't
Right.
understand that they didn't have approval. And
Yeah.
so now their thing was at risk, and it ended up working out okay. But it was, the agent could have been in trouble there.
Yeah. I've never heard of a buyer saying one thing and doing never heard of a buyer not being honest. What are you talking about?
I've never heard buyers are liars either. I don't know why you even made that up just now. So, any other questions or comments before we go forward with nothing? You guys got I do want to talk about this. You guys got your 1099s. Please, as the email said, obviously you guys read the email because you got the link. As the email says, contact either Michelle or Michaela, whoever sent it to you, because we got to do those by the 29th. They have to be finalized with our office by the 29th because you have to have the physical things by the 31st. Now, let me tell you the difference between 1099 and a W-2. A W-2, you actually have to send in a copy to the IRS. Your 1099, you do not. You just report it. Do not be a liar. They're going to check. If they look into you, they're going to check and say, well, FRI says that they paid you $84,000 and you say they gave you $48,000. So just make sure you report the right number, but they don't need to see your 1099. So if you do get it corrected and we give you an email copy, it's perfectly fine. Whatever, you don't even have to print it. Whatever, you just need to know what the number is and report it on your taxes. Okay. If you wait till past that number, we're going to have to do a correction to your 1099. And that takes time with the IRS. and it is very irritating to your brokerage. Yes, Alex. Frederick, you're on mute.
Is there any situation outside of being a U.S. citizen that you would not be classified as a foreign person? Is there any, like, married, permanent resident, married to a U.S. citizen, where that 15% would not have to be?
Okay, so the 15%, how you explain it to your clients is this: if I do not pay my taxes on the gain of something, the IRS can seize my assets and throw me in jail. If I am not a U.S. citizen and I live in another country, or even if I live here, they can't freeze my assets and throw me in jail because I'm not a citizen. So especially if I don't live here. But the answer to that is no, you do have to be a U.S. citizen. You always have an ITIN, which is an individual taxpayer identification number. You'll always have that, regardless of what you do. But you need a social security number to avoid FERPTA.
So even if, like, a spouse is a U.S. citizen and then the other spouse is a permanent resident and they're married, that you still would have to withhold that 15%?
I don't know that. Maybe the one spouse, if you're an entity together.
If you're both on the title, that's what I was wondering.
Can you do what?
Because let's say the couple are on the title, one's a permanent resident, but they're married, and the other's a U.S. citizen. Do you have to withhold
I
that?
think one citizen would probably be fine because they're going to pay it. They're going to have to pay it. But otherwise, I mean, I don't know. You have to check.
Okay.
I just know that IRS would rather have their money, have their, they've determined, I think in 2017 is when they switched to 15% from 10%. Used to think, and it's 15% of the total sales price, regardless of payoffs and everything else. Tough luck on that. You better have extra. And typically you do, because foreign nationals had to have at least 25% down to buy something. So unless the values fall through the floor, that won't be a problem. But they, as far as covering payoffs, but they determined that 15% is typically enough to cover the capital gains.
Okay, and promise, the last question. You said on 9CI, you said something about the typical cost for title is, did you say $600? And then you made
600 per 100,000.
600 per 100,000, and that's why you used the 500K, 3K example.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
And that's a rough number. Different jurisdictions, maybe different things, different prices. I don't know. Haven't really checked lately with I can. Let me look at something real quick. I'll give you an example because I have one right here. I have a settlement statement for a $300,000 vacant property. Let me see how much.
Why
You guys know the doc stamps are $2,100. That makes sense, right? $7 per thousand. Insurance. Title search. Owner's policy, $1,575. So yeah, that's $525 per 100,000, plus a title search of $200 and closing service fees, whatever. But yeah, so with $1,575 for $300,000, that's $525 per 100,000 plus the $200 for the title search. So that one's $525 per 100. I don't know why it would be different.
Where do I go to get that answer about the question I asked, that unique situation, a spouse?
Mhm.
Or where can I find that answer?
An attorney, probably.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe Google.com.
All right, I'll
But
look into it. Thank you.
yeah. Any other questions?
Would he be able to call the Florida Realtors legal hotline and get that?
You can call them. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten a real answer from them on anything, but good luck. I don't want to go into that anymore. I know there are a lot more people with law degrees than have good paying law jobs, and that some of those people work hotlines, they're fresh out of school, or I've never had them say, when I ask them and for advice, and they've given me advice before, and I've said, can I say who told me that? And they're like, no, well, don't, wouldn't do that. I mean, they don't put anything behind it. So I think they're good probably for basic legal questions, but I've never gotten an answer that I felt really great about. But that's just me, personal experience, anecdotal evidence. I don't know anything. So any other questions or comments?
This is more on the insurance topic, but I heard, has anybody heard about this? Somebody's floating a bill that would, I don't think that it's going to make it through, but they were proposing to just have everybody do citizens for hurricane coverage. Have you guys heard about this? I doubt it'll go anywhere, but there's somebody that is proposing that we all be forced to use citizens for all hurricane coverage moving forward.
Well, I mean, if they're doing that, they're probably, I'm sure it means well. It's trying to save the system. But I don't know. Yeah, I just Googled it. They're under federal investigation for something. I don't know. So I don't know. I haven't heard about that. Look into it. Any other questions before we go? Everybody doing well? Nobody has anything to add? Everybody's doing great? Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we will see you. Today is the 24th. We'll see you guys next week on the 31st. And have a great week. Enjoy yourselves. Bye, everybody. Yes, Angie? Nothing? Okay. Goodbye. Tom, did you have something? Okay. Bye, everybody.